Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, and a first ever for this particular show. Now, is it a collection of five-star platter wines? Is it a globally celebrated iconic wine estate? Is it the kind of place that sits on magazines and newspapers around the world? Well, no, not really. It's a wine estate in a very unusual part of South Africa, except it's not even a wine estate. It's a cooperative, and it's the largest one in the Southern Hemisphere, the Orange River Cellars from the Northern Cape. And as you can see on the back of this particular bottle, you're looking in the area round about Uppington. And I'm not sure that if you gave people a long list of places to choose wine from, Uppington would sit anywhere near the top. It's certainly not a globally celebrated wine area, and yet it is home to some extraordinary volumes of wine, because the Orange River Cellars, the largest cooperative in the Southern Hemisphere. A good friend of mine, Martin Tucker, had been banging on about wine in Uppington for ages. I thought, much like many things with Martin Tucker, who's the man behind the Cape Town Festival of Beer, that he was simply making them all up. But it turns out that he was correct, and I've come upon these wines through a friend of mine, a guy called Andre Ross, who is probably the world's only teetotal wine expert. Doesn't drink a drop, but knows vast amounts about wine. And he sent me this wine, having been down to the area himself, reckons it's beautiful, reckons it's full of people who are making some terrific wine and having a great deal of fun doing so. And he picked up a few bottles on his trip to drop off for me to see if I wanted to try them. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. A couple of bottles of Bubbles, a Colombard, and a red blend from the Uppington area, not where I ever thought I'd be sampling wine from. Now, the first of these, I'll admit, I'm trying with a little trepidation. It's a sparkling rosé, which is not why I'm nervous, but it is a sweet sparkling rosé, and overly sweet wine, other than a dessert wine, has never really been my forte. But this has been given to me by my friend Andre, and so I will plunge into the rosé sparkling from the heart of the Orange River. Now, the colour is quite intense. Normally you think of rosé in a pink hue of one sort or another, something salmonish, but this, not inappropriately, really is an orange colour, slightly burnt thereof, but an appropriate hue for wine from the Orange River. To be honest, probably not for me. That is very sweet indeed. Maybe when I was just out of school into university, when the palate was more of a blunt instrument, a little overpowering. Probably, if my friend Andre does decide to start drinking, not a bad one for him, because he gets through half a dozen Coca-Colas and several Fantas a day. It does have that sweetness to it. So, I think I'll try a couple of the others. A dose of sweetness done, onto something that I suspect will be a lot drier. And when I picture this part of the world, Uppington and Northern Cape surrounds, I have this vision of a Mad Max type setting, just lots and lots of nothing. Kind of leave Cape Town, there'll be a village or two in Namibia somewhere along the way, across the ocean, and your next stop of civilization and consequences, Buenos Aires or somewhere around there. But it's not quite that way, not just in terms of as sparse a population as I might envisage, but also in terms of the setting and the vegetation. It's not just one giant stretch of desert. Yes, there are plenty of areas that are rather barren, but the Orange River, a substantial stretch of water that's fueling about a 350 kilometre stretch of the wine-making world. So plenty of water, plenty to sustain, but also an area that's surrounded by some fairly dry climes. That combination for a brut-style wine could come up trumps. And that, for me, a lot more palatable than the first one. An overly sweet wine, not really my space. This is a lot drier. It's still not bone dry. There's still plenty of fruit to it and a nice bit of sparkle. Describes itself as a party wine, and probably not a bad one to have if you're having a big get-together and the budget isn't too extensive. A couple of cases of this through the course of the evening and you could certainly do worse. Nowhere near as sweet as the first one. Got a nice smoothness to it. and a perfectly pleasant export from the Orange River. Now then on to the two wines from here that I'm really interested in. It wasn't that long ago that we tried for the very first time on the show down at Element House a Colombard, and it's Ibn Sadi, who is a sage when it comes to wine, who believes that Colombard could be one of South Africa's coming success stories, much in the way we've seen things like Cinsault spring to life over the last little while. It is the Colombard, and it's also from that Uppington area. And it's only the second one I've ever had on the show. The association with wine, particularly when tasting, is always to find a fruit that pairs off with it. And from starting with peach, kind of morphing into a guava type feel to it, it's a varietal we don't see a lot of, and it's one I didn't have the highest of expectations, to be honest with. Inexpensive white wine is usually something to skirt around, but there are welcome exceptions, and I think this is one of them. You probably have a fairly sore head if you have too much of it the following day, but chill this down, and during the week, as an alternative to the stock standard Sauvignon Blanc you may have in the fridge for a glass or two after work, I think this could make an excellent alternative. Colombard's story, Ibn Sadi believes, is just starting to catch fire. This Orange River Cellars varietal, particularly at the price, won't hurt. And then to the final wine my friend Andre, the teetotal wine expert, passed on to me to sample. And this is the Lyra Shiraz Reserve. There is a Petit Verdot-led blend that they also have in the same family. So this is a cousin thereof. The sparkling's a bit of a mixed bag. The Colombard, not too bad at all. How are the red shape up? A little rough around the edges perhaps, but there's still plenty to enjoy. There's a nice smokiness to it. It's a fairly smooth wine. It can soften in another year or two perhaps, but for a wine that comes out of such an unorthodox area of the wine growing world, and for a wine that celebrates itself as being in the more entry-level space, even in the case of the Reserve, that's not too unpleasant at all. And what it really says to me is that I think I need to make a voyage down to the Orange River area, a wine pilgrimage. I've spent plenty of time in the more usual wine growing areas, but maybe heading down to the world's largest Southern Hemisphere wine cooperative is a trip that I need to make. Based on the evidence so far, I think it's worth the time. Cheers.